Hi, good morning. We're thankful for a new day. I'm here with a new video for my channel. It's called The Plagues of the Bible. It's based on the inundation of the Nile River and the Egyptian seasons of the year. This is taken from William Osborne Jr.'s book called Israel and Egypt. He's a scholar from the early 19th century. I'm very thankful for his works. I've read all three of his books, 2 volumes on the monumental history of Egypt, and then the other one that this research is based on, Israel, Israel and in Egypt, I believe it's called. Let me see. Let me scroll down to the bottom here. Israel and Egypt. You can find those 3 books on the Internet Archive. So praise and thanks to William Osborne Jr. for his work on the monuments of Egypt. He uses the expert sources of his time, which are included in his books, and he bases his research solely on what the Egyptian monuments say. And this is what he says in his book here. The oldest name for Egypt is Ta Meri, which means the land of the inundation in northern Egypt. During the inundation, Egypt would resemble an inland sea. The inundation of the Nile was very important to the ancient Egyptians. The seasons, the year, and the crops that were produced from it were all based on or depended on the inundation. Orlando Schmidt says that there are some features about the flood story in Genesis that lead him to believe that it was originally taken from an account of the inundation in Egypt. And according to Osborne, the God that appeared in the burning bush to Moses was I Am, or Jehovah, and that he told Moses that it was his responsibility to ask permission from the Pharaoh to bring the Israelites out of Egypt and into Canaan. Jehovah is El Shaddai, which means God Almighty, or the doer of all things. This name is also given to Ramses, as well as to all of the gods of Egypt. They are all called God Almighty. Therefore, I'll ask you the question, is Jehovah an Egyptian God? I'll also pose another question to you. Is Jehovah the equivalent of Ra? So I'm not going to go into that. We can go into that in another video, but those are just questions for you to think about. Moses was allowed to return to Egypt because the northern pharaoh Ptah was issued a warrant for Moses' arrest had died. So the pharaoh Ptah, who was the northern pharaoh of the time of Moses, he died. So Moses was able to go back to Egypt. Jehovah told Aaron to go with Moses. Ptah was from the line of Apophis, the pharaoh that Joseph worked under. Ptah was the husband of Queen Doris, a priestess of Hathor, who is an equivalent to Eve. She was the daughter of Ramses II, the southern pharaoh. Ptah was I don't know how to pronounce this word, Exus king of northern Egypt. When Ramses II and his sons that were next in line died, she ascended the throne. She allowed Ptah to rule northern Egypt while she ruled the south with her 13th baby son of Ramses II. The Apophian pharaohs of northern Egypt were allies with the Israelites who lived in Egypt. Moses grew up in the court of the pharaoh Ptah. When Ptah dies, Sethos II, the grandson of Ramses II, is now the new pharaoh of all of Egypt. Very important is that Siptah and the Apophis family ruled very liberally in contrast to very liberally in the north in contrast to the southern kings. This is why immigration was so strong in the north. So when Sethos II, Ramses II's grandson, became king, he ruled instead like a southern king under Ra, because he saw how powerful and numerous the immigrants were becoming. Sethos II bonded the Israelites to work, again like his grandfather had done under his rule. They had to build cities and monuments and had to be soldiers in the army. Remember that Ramses II did not know Joseph, so he's the pharaoh. Ramses II is the pharaoh that did not know Joseph. Because of the adoption, because he's the pharaoh in the south, coming from Thebes. Ramses of the adoption of Moses, because of the adoption of Moses by Princess Dioris, the daughter of Ramses II, because the adoption of Moses by Princess Dioris, the daughter of Ramses II, the tribe of Levi was able to become wealthy and exercise influence in the royal court and within the delta. They acted like princes and grew up around the pharaohs of the north. When Aaron and Moses told Sethos II what Jehovah had said, Sethos II said that he did not know Jehovah and that they could not take the Israelites out of Egypt. Sethos II is also called Seti II, was the pharaoh of the Exodus. Sethos II would not allow the Israelites to have straw to build bricks. This caused the Israelite officers who were appointed by the Egyptians as supervisors over the Israelite builders to be beaten because they could not complete their work without the straw. Think of the Big Bad Wolf and the Three Little Pigs story. The House of Straw. Moses said that Sethos II would not listen to him because he is uncircumcised. So Moses is the one that's uncircumcised, not the Pharaoh. The inundation of the Nile ensures an abundant crop for the Egyptians. However, when it floods, it would wash away houses, kill cattle, and cause famines. When this happens, the spirit of the Nile was considered evil. Thus, the plagues of Jehovah begin. Beginning June 21st, the summer solstice is when the Nile is at its lowest point and it now begins to rise. Osborne says while he was in Egypt, he witnessed during the month of June, when the Nile begins to rise, that the water turns red. He says that this is because when the rains in the Ethiopian highlands begin, the Nile begins to flood. It picks up all the stagnant dark water that has sat in pools for a while and brings it down the river, changing the color of the water. Wallace Budge says the Blue Nile's red muddy water reaches Aswan, Egypt about July 15th and Cairo 10 days later. Therefore, at this time, Jehovah tells Moses to use his staff to turn the water red. The pharaohs were well aware of this, and among other seasonal phenomenons, used these changes in the environment that occurred due to the seasonal changes of nature as opportunities to wield their power and show their godly abilities to the public as ways to control and legitimize their rule. The water would stay red for 7 days before it cleared. More time passes, and the next passage in the Bible is the passage of the frogs. Jehovah sends frogs out which cover all of Egypt and go into the Pharaoh's palace. Osborne says that this is due to the rising of the Nile and the rains, which bring an abundance of frogs. Next came the swarms of the flies sent out by Jehovah. Osborne says that this is actually mosquitoes that come out during the Nile flooding. Once the Nile reaches its maximum height at about the end of September, the Pharaoh goes to the edge of the Nile water and the ceremonies of the inundation begin. He will open the floodgates to the canals and then the feast will begin. Next, Jehovah says that he will kill all of the Egyptian cattle, when in fact during the inundation it is an important time for the herdsmen. They must keep their herds from drowning. They must find places for their cattle to eat where it is not flooded, and they use their cattle to stomp seeds into the mud to begin the growing season. Many cattle get sick and die during this season in Egypt. Next are the ashes and the boils that come from the ashes of the burning. The Hebrew word used here for burning means a tract or of country on fire. Osborne says that during this season, the husbandmen who work the fields rake all of the dead brush up and away from the river and burn it. This happens even at the present day. Therefore, the ashes from these burnings are coming down from the air carried by the winds. More evidence of this is the first day of the feast is called Reich Naheb, which means the feast of the greater burning, and the last day is called Reich Tisb, the feast of the lesser burning. When Osborne was there on the Nile watching this take place and seeing the ashes come down on his colleagues' shirts, that's when he realized this was the plagues of the Bible. Osborne says that this was probably taking place in front of Sethos II, with Moses and Aaron there next to him. And that all of these miracles due to the religious beliefs of the Nile, and that all of these miracles are due to the religious beliefs of the Nile inundation. At this time the north winds blow strong and spread the ashes. The rise of the Nile continues until about October 1st. Next is the hail and rain season with thunder and lightning, which happens between November and February in Egypt, also said to be caused by Jehovah in the Bible. The Pharaoh Sethos II left the delta around this time, and while he was gone, the Israelites gathered in Goshen at Axis, which is also called Sukkoth. That was the capital of the shepherd kings in the northeast corner of Egypt before you would reach the Sinai. Once the rain and hail ends, the turtle doves come out and go into the trees. Think of Noah's Ark. Then the locusts come out after winter, and when the rain stop, when everything is green and there is a lot of plant life, they come to feed. They stay for a couple of weeks, then leave, but this was also apparently created by Jehovah. Then Jehovah blocks the sun, but in actuality, during the spring around April in Egypt, a strong wind comes that blows for more than a month straight and causes sand to cover everything to the point where you can't see, and the sandstorms block out the sun. Then Jehovah kills Sethos II's son. But in reality, he was killed when Sethos II left the delta and his son was alone. And after they killed him, they left because they knew what was going to happen. These Israelites were in the city of Ramses as an army that had collected there and was divided into 12 divisions, each with a prince. Are these the divisions based on the 12 sons of Israel and the 12 tribes? The Israelites had built the city for Ramses II. When Sethos II came back, the Israelites were kicked out of Egypt effective immediately. They moved to Succoth or Axos, the previous capital of the shepherd kings. Axos means tent in Hebrew. Tents in Hebrew. Then they left towards the Sinai. Sethos II had followed them and was killed. Okay, so that's the story that Osborne gives in his book about the plagues, and says that it's based on the year and the seasons and the Nile Inundation, which was very a religious thing for the Egyptians. They depended on it very much, so it really was their life, and it became, a religious thing for them. These are the sources that I used for this: Wallace Budge's book, The Nile; Orlando Schmidt's book, The Chronology of Egypt; um, Wallace Budge's other book, Gods of Egyptians, Volume 2; William Osborne's book, Israel and Egypt; and Willius Breuer's book, Egypt and Israel. Thank you for listening, and take care.